The alien queen returned without warning and found a human caring for her quadruplets. Part 1. The corridor lights in Section 7 had been flickering for 11 days. Cal Dunmore had reported it 3 times. Nothing had been done about it. That was Outermark Station for you. He walked the corridor anyway, the way he did every night before sleep. Not because anything was expected of him at this hour. Not because his supervisor had asked him to. He walked it because he liked the quiet, and because the biological containment wing at the far end of Section 7 was his favorite part of the whole station. It smelled like filtered air and faint antiseptic and the kind of emptiness that belongs only to rooms that have not been used in a long time. It was supposed to be empty tonight. Cal was 34 years old, with the kind of patient face that people often mistook for boredom. He was a xenobiologist by training, which meant he had spent the better part of a decade studying creatures that were not human, from a safe and professional distance, using careful instruments. He was good at watching. He was good at not reacting too fast. So when he pushed open the door to the containment wing and felt the warmth hit him, warmth that had no business being there, in a room with no active climate systems, he did not shout. He did not run. He stood in the doorway and let his eyes adjust, and he looked. They were behind the deactivated climate unit in the far corner. 4 of them. Small, low to the ground, pressed together in a pile of limbs that took Cal a full 10 seconds to count correctly. Velhari hatchlings. He had seen images in databases, read the biological notes, studied the anatomy charts. He had never seen one in person. He had certainly never expected to find 4 of them huddled on the floor of an empty room on a human space station at the edge of nowhere. They were alive. He could see that from the doorway. Their sides moved with slow breath. Their amber eyes, all 8 of them across 4 small faces, caught the light from the corridor and glowed faintly in the dark. There was no adult Velhari anywhere in the room. No message. No explanation. Nothing at all. Cal stood very still. One of the hatchlings made a sound. It was a low, thin sound, the kind a creature makes when it has been making sounds for a long time and is starting to run out of energy. It reached out one limb, small, slightly pale at the tips, and touched the edge of Cal's boot. Cal looked down at it. He later wrote in his log that what he felt in that moment was not heroism and not strategy and not any kind of diplomatic thinking. What he felt was the simple and very human understanding that something small was cold and tired and had reached out to the nearest living thing it could find. He sat down on the floor. He spent the first 20 minutes doing exactly what he would have done with any unknown biological subject, watching. He noted their size, roughly the same as a large house cat, though with 6 limbs each and a body that was lower and wider than the database images had suggested. He noted their coloring, a dark amber brown with faint lines along the back that seemed to shift slightly in different light. He noted that one of them, the smallest, had not let go of his boot. Then he noticed that their body temperature was wrong. He could feel it when he carefully and slowly extended his own hand toward the nearest hatchling, the one that had touched him. Velhari were warm-blooded in the technical sense, but they ran hot, much hotter than humans. These 4 were not running hot. They were barely warmer than the floor beneath them. Cal stood up. He moved slowly so as not to startle them. He went to the storage panel on the wall and opened it and found, as he had hoped, a set of thermal blankets left over from when the containment wing had last been used. He took all of them. He came back. He sat down again. The hatchlings watched him. They did not run. The small one still had his boot. He spread the first thermal blanket on the floor beside them and then he waited. It took about 4 minutes before the boldest one, the first one that had moved its head toward him, stepped onto the blanket. Then the others followed slowly, watching Cal the whole time. The small one was last. It moved onto the blanket and then immediately pressed itself against Cal's knee and made the thin sound again, quieter now, like a thing that was finally letting itself stop. Cal activated his comm. The voice that answered was not happy to be awake. Lieutenant Donna Vale had a particular tone she used for late-night calls, a tone that said, very clearly and without words, that whatever was happening had better be important. Cal told her what he had found. There was a silence on the line. Then Donna said, "You have got to be kidding me." Cal told her that he was not kidding her. Another silence. Then, "How many?" "4, Cal said. Hatchlings. Young ones. I don't know how young exactly, but young. Their temperature is too low. I'm using thermal blankets right now, but they need a real climate environment or they're going to keep getting colder. You have got to be kidding me, Donna said again. You already said that. I'm going to keep saying it. A long pause. He could hear her moving, the sound of a chair, footsteps on a hard floor. Are they being aggressive? Cal looked down at the small one pressed against his knee. No, he said. Not right now. Do they look hurt? I can't do a proper check in the dark with no equipment. They look weak. They look like they haven't eaten. I'm not sure what hungry looks like on a Velhari hatchling, but I think this might be it. Does anyone else know you're in there with them? Just you. Another pause, longer this time. Cal could hear Donna thinking. He had worked under her for 2 years and he knew the particular quality of her silences. This one meant she was looking at bad options and trying to find a less bad one. Okay, she said at last. Keep them warm. Do not let anyone else into that wing tonight. In the morning I'll start making calls, figure out what our legal position is, figure out if anyone is missing 4 Velhari hatchlings and is maybe very upset about it. Until I tell you something different, this does not leave that room. Understood. Understood, Cal said. And Cal. Yeah. You have got to be kidding me. He sat with them for another 3 hours after that. He turned on the room's basic environmental controls manually, getting the temperature up to something that felt safe. He found an old portable heater in the same storage panel as the blankets and set it up facing the corner where the hatchlings had gathered. He did not try to pick them up or look at them too closely. He just sat nearby and let them get used to him being there. The bold one came and sniffed his hand after about an hour. Cal held very still. It had a small flat face and those wide amber eyes, and it looked at him with an expression he could not read, which was unusual. Cal was generally good at reading creatures. He thought of it, privately, as Ro. He did not write that down yet. It felt too soon. The 2 middle ones stayed curled together in the blanket. One fell into a deep, boneless sleep almost as soon as the warmth came up, which made Cal slightly worried until he confirmed steady breathing. The other one touched everything with careful limb tips and watched all of it with large, serious eyes. He thought of them as Set and Kav, but again he kept those names to himself. The small one did not leave his side. At some point in the second hour it climbed very slowly and very deliberately from his knee to his thigh to his arm to his shoulder and sat there. It weighed almost nothing. It made a sound near his ear, very quiet, no obvious meaning, but the kind of sound that feels, in some deep way, like something releasing tension it has held for too long. Cal opened his log for the first time that night. He wrote, Day 1. For Velhari hatchlings, found in Containment Wing B, Section 7. Approximate age unknown. Species confirmed by physical markers. No adult present. No explanation present. Current status, alive. Body temperature was critically low, now stabilizing with supplemental heat. Behavioral status, calm, non-aggressive, responsive to presence. Plan, unclear. He looked at the small one on his shoulder for a moment. He wrote, The small one will not let go of my sleeve. He closed the log. Outside, the corridor lights kept flickering the way they had been flickering for 11 days. The rest of Outermark Station slept through all of it, 42 humans who had no idea that the most important thing to ever happen at this posting was currently sitting in a pile of thermal blankets in an empty room, getting warm, 1 slow degree at a time. The alien queen returned without warning, and found a human caring for her quadruplets. Part 2. 17 days passed. That was how Cal later described it to anyone who asked, and he always said it that way, simply and quickly, as if 17 days were a short amount of time. They were not. 17 days with 4 Velhari hatchlings in a human space station was a long time. It was, in many ways, the longest 17 days of Cal Dunmore's life. On day 2, he figured out that Ru ate protein. Almost any protein. Cal had synthesized a basic nutrient paste from the station's food lab, working off the Velhari biological database entries that dealt with hatchling development. Ru walked up to the bowl, sniffed it, and threw it at the wall. On day 3, Cal found a better formula. Rue ate it without throwing anything. Cal wrote in his log, "Success. Walls remain clean." On day 4, Set tried to eat Cal's stylus. Cal did not catch it in time. The stylus was gone. He wrote, "Set has eaten my stylus. Acquiring backup stylus. Also possibly rethinking career." By day 5, the station's physician, Dr. Pete Harlow, was involved. He had heard about the hatchlings from Donna, who had told him in confidence, which meant he found out within 6 hours. Pete was a short, careful man who kept extremely detailed notes and was not easily frightened, which made him useful. He brought his scanner and spent 2 hours doing what Cal could not do alone, a full physical assessment of all 4 hatchlings without any of them biting him, which Cal considered impressive. The results were not alarming, but they were serious. The hatchlings were malnourished. Their growth markers suggested they had been alone for somewhere between 10 and 14 days before Cal found them. Their immune indicators were low. They needed good food, warmth, and time. Pete wrote it all up in a medical report that he gave to Donna, who read it with her eyes slightly closed the way she did when she was absorbing bad news. Then she gave it to Cal. Then she said, "Keep doing what you're doing." Cal kept doing what he was doing. By day 7, Kov had claimed the warm corner by the heater and defended it as personal property. Kov slept there during the day and screamed with great seriousness if anyone stepped too close. Cal learned to approach from the left. Pete learned to approach from the right. Rue learned to approach from above, which led to a confrontation that Cal documented carefully in his log because it was genuinely interesting from a behavioral standpoint and also because it was very funny. Set remained curious about everything. Every object that entered the containment wing was investigated by Set within minutes. A scanner. A data tablet. A spare thermal blanket. A cup of coffee that Cal had set down for 30 seconds. Set approached all of these with the same careful, deliberate attention and the same conclusion, which was to touch it with a limb tip, taste test the air around it, and then look at Cal as if expecting an explanation. Cal gave explanations. He did not know if Set understood them. He gave them anyway. Ko stayed close to Cal. That was the simplest way to say it. Ko, the smallest one, the one that had grabbed his boot on the first night, had decided something about Cal Dunmore and had not changed that decision. In the mornings, Ko was already awake when Cal arrived, waiting near the door. When Cal moved around the room, Ko followed. When Cal sat down to write his log, Ko sat on his shoulder or his knee or pressed against his side. When Cal left for his regular duties on the rest of the station, he could hear, sometimes, the thin sound starting up again behind the door. He tried not to think about that too much. On day 9, Donna came to him with news that was both good and bad. The good news was that Command had acknowledged the situation. The bad news was that the diplomatic corps had responded with a message that was, in Cal's estimation, the least helpful communication he had ever received from any organization in his life. It said, "Do not cause an incident." It offered no further guidance. "That's it," Cal said. "That's it," Donna said. "They're not going to tell us what to do. They've told us not to cause an incident. They consider that telling us what to do." Cal thought about this. What counts as an incident? Donna looked at the 4 Velhari hatchlings currently occupying his containment wing and then looked back at him. "I think we are already in the incident," she said. On day 10, Cal sent his first message to the Velhari Empire. He had been drafting it for days, rewriting it carefully, trying to find the right words. He identified himself, his station, his credentials. He described what he had found and when. He provided the biological identification markers from Pete's medical report so the Velhari could confirm whose hatchlings these were. He was precise and respectful and professional. He did not say, "Please come get them," but the feeling was in every sentence. He sent it to the nearest Velhari communication relay and then he waited. No response came. He kept feeding them. He kept the lights warm. He kept writing the log. By day 11, news of the hatchlings had spread through the whole station. 43 humans in a closed environment cannot keep a secret for very long, and besides, people had noticed the changes in Section 7. The lights were fixed. The temperature in that corridor was slightly higher than everywhere else. Cal was spending more of his time there than anywhere else on the station. Donna had tried to manage the information but eventually accepted that management was not possible and moved on to management of access. Cal, she decided, could allow supervised visits. 2 crew members at a time, no loud noises, no sudden movements, no trying to touch unless a hatchling came to you first. The visits went better than expected. It turned out that there was something about 4 small creatures thriving in a difficult place that humans found very hard to ignore. The crew came in pairs, quiet and careful, and they watched Ru patrol the perimeter of the room and said investigate every new face and Kav sleep in the warm corner. They watched Ko sit on Cal's shoulder. They went back to their regular duties and their morale was, quietly, better. Cal noticed it. He did not say anything about it in his official log. He mentioned it in his personal notes, which he kept separately. It is strange and probably not scientific, but having something to care for seems to be good for people. The station is running better. People are being kinder to each other. I do not know if this is causal, but it seems worth recording. On day 14, Set ate a small data chip that had fallen behind the environmental console. Pete assessed Set's health as unaffected. The data chip was gone forever. Cal's log entry read, Set remains committed to consuming station property. Have informed Donna. Donna has asked that we not file an official equipment loss report for this one. On day 15, Ru climbed to the top of the thermal unit and stood there for about 4 hours, looking out over the room with visible satisfaction. Cal noted this in his log as Territorial Expansion, Phase 2. On day 16, Kav woke up, walked to the center of the room, screamed at nothing for about 45 seconds, and then went back to the warm corner and went back to sleep. Pete checked Kav's vitals and found everything normal. Just needed to say something, Pete told Cal. Cal nodded. He understood the feeling. On day 17, Cal was sitting in his usual spot in the containment wing, writing in his log, with Ko on his shoulder and the other 3 doing their respective things around the room, when his comm buzzed. It was Donna. Her voice was very controlled, the way it got when she was managing something that she did not want to manage but had no choice about. She said, Cal, I need you to stay in the containment wing with the hatchlings. Do not leave that room. And do not panic. Cal looked at Ko on his shoulder. Ko looked back at him with wide amber eyes. What's happening? Cal asked. There was a short pause. Donna said, a Velhari warship just came out of transit. It is 3 times the size of this station. It is not responding to any of our hailing frequencies. And its weapons are not powered down. The alien queen returned without warning, and found a human caring for her quadruplets. Part 3. The warship did not move. It sat in space about 2 kilometers off the station's port side, enormous and silent and dark except for its running lights, which were red. Cal had looked it up in the database while Donna was mobilizing the station's emergency protocols. The ship was a Velhari brood carrier, a class used specifically for transporting royalty and their personal forces. It was not a military vessel in the attack sense of the word. But it had more weapons than anything Cal had ever seen in a photograph, and right now all of those weapons were pointed at Outermark Station. Donna's voice came over the comm every few minutes with updates. She sounded like a person who had not slept in 2 days and was running on something harder than coffee and tougher than stubbornness. Cal stayed in the containment wing. He had been told to stay and he was staying, but the waiting was one of the hardest things he had done in a long time. He talked to the hatchlings while he waited. He knew this was probably not a scientifically productive use of his time. He did it anyway. He sat on the floor with the thermal blankets and he told them in a calm, steady voice that someone important had come, and that things were going to be tense for a little while, and that they should not worry. Ru ignored him entirely and continued patrolling the wall. Set sat directly in front of Cal and watched his face while he spoke with an expression of careful attention. Kav slept. Ko pressed against Cal's side and made the low, quiet sound it sometimes made in the evenings. Cal kept talking. It helped him more than it helped them, probably. 30 minutes after the warship appeared, the hailing silence broke. The Velhari had begun communicating, not with the station's standard frequency, but on a diplomatic channel that Outermark systems barely had the software to process. The translation was rough and partial. Donna sent Cal a copy of what they had. It was a demand for immediate confirmation that the hatchlings were alive and unharmed. Nothing else. Just that. Cal typed back his response through Donna, alive, unharmed, healthy, and currently being very loud about wanting their second feeding of the day. Donna sent that message. Then she sent Cal a separate note that said, "I edited the last part. You're welcome." The Velhari response came 11 minutes later. It was a single word, in the original Velhari script, which the translation software rendered with a confidence rating of 61% as, "confirmed." Then the boarding ramp extended. Cal heard it through the station walls, the clamp of a docking connection, the deep sound of a pressure seal, the particular silence that means an airlock has opened and something is moving through it. He heard boots on the corridor floor, many of them, and the sound was different from human boots, heavier and more regular, a pattern of 6 contact points instead of 2. He heard Donna's voice on the general comm, clear, professional, not showing a single thing. "All station crew to quarters. All station crew to quarters. Non-essential personnel clear all corridors immediately. This is not a drill." Cal stayed where he was. The footsteps came closer. He could hear them moving through the station, stopping at various points, probably checking rooms, probably establishing that the station was exactly what it appeared to be and not some kind of trap. Cal sat on the floor of the containment wing with 4 Velhari hatchlings and he waited, and he did not pretend, even to himself, that he was not scared. He was scared. He was also not going to move. The footsteps stopped outside the containment wing door. There was a long moment of nothing. Then the door opened. She was much taller than the photographs in the database. Queen Verithsun stood in the doorway with 6 of her soldiers behind her, and she filled the frame in a way that had nothing to do with physical size and everything to do with presence. Her chiton was a deep dark color, almost black, with the same faint shifting lines that Cal had noticed on the hatchlings' backs. Her secondary limbs, 4 of them, were held close to her body. Her primary eyes were fixed on the room. She was not looking at Cal. She was looking at the blankets in the corner. At the heater. At the food bowls that Pete had cleaned and set out that morning. At the small marks on the wall where Rue had been claiming territory. At all of it. Then Rue moved. It happened very fast. Rue crossed the room in a straight line, no hesitation, no caution, just direct and certain movement toward the figure in the doorway. Then Set was moving, and Kav was suddenly awake and moving, and the 3 of them reached the Queen at almost the same moment, and the sound they made was unlike anything Cal had heard from them in 17 days. It was loud and high and full of something that needed no translation at all. Verithsun went down to the floor. All of her limbs opened and the 3 hatchlings climbed into them, and she held them with a stillness that was not calm but was something much larger than calm. She was very quiet. Her soldiers were very quiet. The whole room was quiet. Cal did not move. He was aware, after a moment, that Ko had not run. Ko was still beside him. Pressed against his side, the way it had been for 17 days, making the quiet sound. Cal could feel it trembling slightly, which it sometimes did when something changed suddenly in the room. He looked at Ko. Ko looked at the Queen. Then Ko looked at Cal. 3 seconds passed. Then Ko ran across the room and climbed into the Queen's arms with the others. Cal watched this happen. He found that he did not have anything to write in his log about it. He found that his log felt very far away. Verithsun held all 4 of them for a long time. The soldiers remained at the door. Nobody spoke. When she finally looked up, she looked at Cal. Her eyes were large and amber, exactly like the hatchling's eyes, and she looked at him the way someone looks at a thing they expected to find one way and found another. Her expression was not readable to him. He was, usually, good at reading creatures. He had been good at it for his whole career. He had nothing for this. He looked back at her. He did not look away. Not because he was trying to be brave, but because it seemed like the wrong moment to look away, and because looking away felt dishonest, and because he had been in this room for 17 days and he had nothing to be ashamed of and nowhere to hide and no reason to pretend otherwise. She looked at him for a very long time. Then she looked back at her hatchlings and she said something in Velhari, low and quiet, and the translation software in Cal's earpiece produced nothing usable at all. But the sound of it, the tone of it, required no translation. It was the sound of someone who had been very afraid and had arrived too late and had found, against all reasonable expectation, that everything was still all right. Cal sat down on the floor. His legs had decided this was the right time to stop working properly. He agreed with his legs. Outside the containment wing, in the corridor, he could hear Donna's voice, steady and professional, beginning the formal diplomatic exchange with the Velhari officer who had arrived with the Queen. He could hear the careful, difficult work of two species trying to talk to each other starting up around him. Inside the room, it was quiet. Rue was already asleep in the Queen's arms. Set was investigating one of her secondary limbs with the usual serious attention. Kov had apparently decided that the Queen's presence was not sufficient reason to be awake and had gone back to sleep against her side. Ko was curled at her throat, making the quiet sound. Verithsun did not take her eyes off Cal. Cal did not take his eyes off her. Neither of them said anything. There was nothing to say yet. There would be things to say later. Cal could feel that coming, the weight of all the conversations that were ahead. But right now there was only this, a queen who had come back and found her children safe, and the human who had kept them that way, sitting on the floor across from each other in a warm room at the edge of space, trying to figure out what to do next. The alien queen returned without warning, and found a human caring for her quadruplets. Part 4. They did not let Cal leave the containment wing for the first 6 hours. This was not, as far as he could tell, a hostile decision. It was a procedural one. The Velhari soldiers had a system, and the system required that all non-Velhari personnel remain in their current location while the Queen was present and while the diplomatic situation was being assessed. Cal understood this. He sat on his usual spot on the floor and he waited, and he drank the terrible coffee that Pete brought him through a door that a soldier opened exactly wide enough to pass a cup through and then closed again. Pete managed to whisper, "How are you doing?" before the door closed. Cal whispered back, "Ask me later." He could hear things happening in the station beyond the door. He could hear Donna's voice, controlled and steady, the voice she used when she was managing something very difficult and would not let anyone see how difficult it was. He could hear the Velhari officer, whose voice came through the walls as a low set of sounds that the translation software in Cal's earpiece struggled with and mostly gave up on. He could hear the general sounds of a station that had 43 humans in it trying very hard not to make any sudden movements. Inside the containment wing, it was quieter. The Queen had settled in the far corner, the warm corner that had been Kov's territory, with all 4 hatchlings arranged around her. She was still. For long stretches of time she did not move at all except to make small adjustments when one of the hatchlings shifted position. Her secondary limbs stayed close to her body. Her primary eyes tracked the room at regular intervals. Every time they came back to Cal, he was looking at her. He was not sure what she thought about that. After about 2 hours, one of the soldiers entered the room and went to the environmental console in the wall. Cal was not certain of the Velhari concept of gender, but the soldier was built similarly to the Queen, so he used that pronoun, spent about 10 minutes accessing the console before Cal realized what he was doing. He was reviewing the recording logs. The containment wing's monitoring system had been running since Cal first activated the environmental controls on night 1. 17 days of footage. 17 days of log entries. All of it. Cal watched the soldier download everything onto a data chip and leave the room. He found that he was not bothered by this. Whatever was on those recordings was exactly what had happened. He had nothing to hide in 17 days of recordings. If anything, he thought, the footage might help explain things better than any conversation could. At hour 4, Donna was allowed to come to the door. She could not enter, but she could speak through it. She told Cal that the situation was progressing. She told him that the Velhari diplomatic attaché had arrived in a second ship and was now involved in the negotiations. She told him that his message to the Velhari communication relay had been received, analyzed, and was being discussed. She said, "You're either going to come out of this as the most important human in diplomatic history or the cause of a serious interstellar problem." Cal said, "Is there a middle option?" Donna said, "There is not." She left. Cal finished his coffee. At hour 6, the door opened and a Velhari soldier asked Cal, in careful and slightly formal translated standard, to please come to the station's conference room. Cal stood up. He looked at Ko, who was still near him, and then at the Queen, who was watching him from across the room. He nodded to her once. He was not sure if that was a gesture she understood. She did not respond to it. He went through the door. The conference room was small and it had a table that was too short for the Queen, who Cal expected would not be using it anyway. He sat on one side. He was given water. He drank it. He waited. She came in alone. No soldiers. She closed the door. She sat across from him, or as close to sitting as her physical structure allowed, and she placed something on the table between them, a flat data chip, the same one her soldier had downloaded from the containment wing's console. She had reviewed 17 days of footage. Cal understood that from the way she looked at him, steady and specific, like a person who has studied something carefully and arrived with questions that are already half-answered. She said, through the translation earpiece that a Velhari aide had provided, "Why?" That was the whole question. Just that word. Cal thought about it honestly. He thought about the various ways he could answer it, the professional answer, the diplomatic answer, the careful answer that would play well in a report. He set all of those aside. He said, they were cold and alone and they reached out. What was I supposed to do? The translation software processed this. There was a pause. The Queen was silent for a long time. Not an uncomfortable silence, exactly. A thinking silence. Cal had learned to recognize those in his work. She asked about the log. Specifically about the entries. She asked if he had written them as an official record or for himself. Both, Cal said. It started as a record. After the first few days it was also for myself. She asked about the individual names he had used for the hatchlings. Ro. Set. Kav. She asked how he had chosen them. Cal hesitated. He said, I needed something to call them. I chose sounds that felt right. I don't know if they mean anything in your language. I apologize if they do. The Queen made a sound that the translation software did not attempt. She said, they do not mean anything harmful. Ru is a sound associated with strength, in an old dialect. It is not inappropriate. Cal noted this. Then she asked about Ko. She asked specifically about Ko. She asked about the footage from the mornings, when Ko waited at the door. She asked about the recordings of Ko on his shoulder. She asked about the 3 seconds, on the day of her arrival, when Ko stayed at Cal's side before following the others. Cal did not have a scientific answer for any of this. He gave her the only answer he had. He said, Ko looked back. The Queen was very still. Cal said, when the others ran to you, Ko looked at you and then looked back at me. For about 3 seconds. I don't know what that means in your culture. I don't know what it meant to Ko. I know what I saw. The translation software processed this. The Queen's secondary limbs moved slightly, the first time they had moved significantly since she entered the room. She asked, and what did you see? Cal thought about this for a moment. He said, I saw a small creature that had 2 places it belonged. And it made a choice. I was glad it made the right one. The room was very quiet. The Queen looked at him for a long time. He looked back at her. Outside the conference room, the station made its regular sounds, the hum of the recyclers, the distant voices of Donna and the Velhari attaché, the gentle ongoing effort of 43 humans and a Velhari delegation trying to understand each other. Cal did not look away. The Queen said, after a long time, you were not afraid of them. Cal said, I was afraid. I was just more concerned than I was afraid. The Queen said, that is an unusual response. Cal said, I've been told that before. Something happened in her expression. He still could not read it fully. But something moved in it, something that felt less like assessment and more like recognition. She stood. She said, I will speak with you again before we depart. Then she left the room. Cal sat at the table for a while longer. He was not sure how long. His sense of time had been unreliable all day. Pete found him there eventually and brought him food, which he ate without tasting it, and they sat together without talking because neither of them had the right words yet and both of them knew it. In his personal notes that night, not in the official log, Cal wrote, she asked me why. I told her the truth. I do not know if the truth was the right thing to say. I think it was the only thing I had. The alien Queen returned without warning, and found a human caring for her quadruplets. Part 5. It took 3 days to prepare the departure. 3 days of careful, exhausting, very detailed work. Donna had not slept properly in what felt like a week and had stopped pretending that coffee was a substitute for rest. The Velhari diplomatic attaché, a tall, precise individual named something that the translation software rendered as Coordinator Velhas, had been in continuous discussion with Outermark's diplomatic officer since the first morning. Cal had met Velhas twice. Both times, Velhas had looked at Cal with an expression that the translation software did not cover but that Cal interpreted, based on years of working with non-human subjects, as something between careful curiosity and reluctant respect. The negotiations were, by all accounts, going better than expected. There were several reasons for this. Donna's steady professionalism was one of them. The treaty framework that already existed between humanity and the Velhari Empire was another. But the main reason, which nobody said directly and everybody understood, was the 17 days of footage from the containment wing. Velhas had reviewed all of it. The Velhari soldiers who had walked the station's corridors had reviewed sections of it. The Queen had reviewed all of it more than once. The footage showed exactly what had happened. A human had found 4 sick hatchlings alone in an empty room and had stayed with them, fed them, kept them warm, and named them, and had done all of this for 17 days with no guarantee that anything good would come from it. It was, Velhas told Donna on the second day, a difficult record to argue with. Pete was already writing a paper. He told Cal this on the morning of the second day with the particular excitement of a scientist who has stumbled into an unprecedented research situation and cannot quite contain it. His paper was going to be about Velhari hatchling development and nutrition in non-native environments. It was also, Pete acknowledged, going to include a very detailed section on the behavioral observations, specifically the attachment behaviors, specifically Co. Are you going to put my name in it? Cal asked. Your name is going to be in the title, Pete said. Cal told him to calm down. On the morning of the third day, the departure preparations were complete. The formal documents had been reviewed and signed by both sides. The treaty amendments had been drafted and were ready for submission to the appropriate offices on both sides of the border. Donna had finally slept for 5 consecutive hours and was, as a result, almost optimistic. Cal spent most of that morning in the now quiet containment wing. The hatchlings were with the Queen, elsewhere on the station, being prepared for the return journey. The room was the same as it had always been: the thermal unit, the portable heater, the storage panel, the marks on the wall, the food bowls that Pete had stacked neatly near the door. Without the hatchlings in it, it was just a room again. He sat on the floor in his usual spot anyway. He wrote in his log, Day 31. The Velhari depart today. Formal documentation complete. Station is intact. Crew is intact. Donna has slept. Pete is writing. Everything is technically fine. He paused for a long time. He did not write anything else yet. Queen Verithsun found him there. She came alone, the same way she had come to the conference room 2 days before, without her soldiers, without the attaché, without ceremony of any kind. She stood in the doorway of the containment wing and looked at the room for a moment, the same way Cal had been looking at it, and then she came in and she sat, as close to sitting as her structure allowed, a short distance from him. Cal waited. She set something on the floor between them. It was small and dark and smooth, warm to the touch in a way that did not match the room temperature. Cal looked at it without picking it up. This is a kinship token, she said, through the translation earpiece. 3rd-tier kinship. In our culture this means, you are not family but you are something that does not have a simple word. You are someone my family owes. You are someone my family would answer. Cal looked at the token for a moment. Then he picked it up. It was light. The warmth in it was steady. Thank you, he said. The Queen was quiet for a moment. Then she said, Ko said your name. Cal looked up. Not in our language, she said. In the way a very young hatchling tries to repeat a sound it has heard many times. In a warm room. With steady hands nearby. Ko said the sound it associates with the person who was always there. It said your name. Cal did not say anything. He was not sure he was capable of saying anything right at that moment. She said, I was told that the treaty amendment will be filed under a standard administrative designation. I have asked that it be filed differently. I have asked that it be named in the official diplomatic record as the Dunmore Clause. Cal said, I don't know what to say to that. You do not have to say anything, she said. The clause is not a reward. It is an acknowledgement. It says, if a human is cold and alone and reaches out, the Velhari will answer. It says this because you demonstrated that the reverse is also true. She stood. Cal stood too, because it seemed like the right thing to do. She looked at him one more time with those large amber eyes, the same eyes as her hatchlings, and he looked back at her, and they stayed like that for a moment, two very different kinds of creature who had ended up, through a series of unlikely events, in a position of mutual debt that neither of them had planned for or expected. Then she left. He heard the boarding ramp retract 30 minutes later. He heard the pressure seal release. He heard, through the station's outer hull, the deep and distant sound of the Velhari warship's engines beginning to move. The station shuddered slightly as the transit wake hit it, the way it always shuddered when something large moved past in space. Then the sound was gone. Cal stood in the containment wing for a while. He looked at the thermal unit, still warm from months of use. He looked at the marks on the wall where Rue had claimed territory. He looked at the small dent on the door panel where Set had tried, with genuine commitment, to eat the locking mechanism. He looked at the shoulder of his uniform jacket, where there was a set of tiny claw marks that Pete had already confirmed would not come out in any wash cycle at any temperature. He sat down on the floor. He opened his log. He wrote, Day 31. They are gone. Station is quiet. LT Vale says we are now technically the most diplomatically significant posting in human space. Pete is already writing a paper. Donna has coffee again. I think I might sleep for about a week. He stopped. He held the kinship token in his hand. It was still warm. It would stay warm, he later learned, for as long as the kinship was recognized. Velhari materials science was, among other things, extraordinary. He wrote, Ko said my name. He sat with that for a moment, just that sentence, short and complete and more than enough. Then he closed the log. Outside Section 7 the corridor lights were working properly for the first time in weeks. Someone on the maintenance crew had finally fixed them. The whole corridor was bright and steady and clear. Cal walked back toward his quarters through the clean light, past the doors of the people he worked with, past the small sounds of a station settling back into its ordinary rhythms, past all of it, with a warm token in his pocket and a name in the air that a very small creature had learned and kept and said out loud on the day it found its way home. It was enough. It was, in fact, more than enough. It was the whole thing.